One moment. There we go. And for the Policy Leadership Academy, we are in Module 8. So we are so excited that you have been with us for now these 8 sessions. We're going to go to 12, with the last being the second to the last being dark, and then we're going to have our recap and survey sign in. If you could take a moment to please look to the chat to sign in, we appreciate it. This is our only record that you're here. So if you can take a moment, we appreciate it. We'll also give that sign-in sheet to you at the end. If you can also choose a language, if you'd like to hear this presentation in Spanish, we do have our 2 translators with us today, Carmen and Carlos. So I'm going to ask Carmen to take a moment to explain that if you'd like to hear this in Spanish, you can. So Carmen, take it away.
Buenos días. Buenos días y bienvenidos a la reunión de hoy. Si gustan escuchar esta reunión en español y están en su computadora o laptop, abajito en su tablero, en la inferior de su pantalla, van a mirar un símbolo que es un mundo, y en ese mundo van a hacer clic y elegir el idioma de su preferencia. Si están en su celular o una tableta, al inferior de su pantalla, abajo en el tablero, van a mirar 3 puntitos donde dice More o Más, y ahí mismo van a poder elegir el idioma de su preferencia. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Carmen. Appreciate it. And as we move forward, about us, as I always do every module, I like to explain why we're here. The Academy brings together stakeholders, community residents, such as yourselves, to understand, address local, statewide, and federal issues through a shared knowledge of cause and impact, problem solving, frameworks, best practices, and action to address change with an emphasis on policy. Our timeline, well, we're almost at the end of March. This is it. And so then, as I mentioned, we'll be for 4 more weeks in April. That second to the last will be dark. And then we'll do our recap and final survey for April, which will be a chance for you to give us your feedback, your honest feedback. So we'll really appreciate that at the end of April. Today, we're so pleased to have with us our speaker, Congressman Mike Garcia, his presentation on decision making, followed by a Q&A. Congressman Mike Garcia is with the House of Representatives, and decision making is the topic. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can properly introduce him. So, a first-generation American citizen, Congressman Mike Garcia was a highly decorated United States naval officer and businessman before serving in the United States House of Representatives. His superb flying performance earned him the honor of becoming one of the first FA-18 Super Hornet strike fighter pilots in the Navy. While on active duty, Congressman Garcia flew over 30 combat missions during Operation Iraqi Freedom in the skies above Baghdad, Fallujah, and Tikrit. Hope I could pronounce that right. A top graduate of Saugus High School, Congressman Garcia was nominated to attend the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis by former U.S. Representative Howard Buck McKeon. Graduating with a bachelor's degree while majoring in political science with a minor in Spanish, Congressman Garcia was in the top 3% of his class. Upon graduating from Annapolis, Garcia also attended graduate school at Georgetown University, where he earned a master's degree in national security studies. After receiving his commission, Congressman Garcia attended flight school. On the heels of 9/11, Congressman Garcia deployed as an F-18 strike fighter pilot aboard the USS Nimitz, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Throughout his career, Congressman Garcia was lauded as one of the best leaders and most naturally talented pilots in the U.S. Navy. He participated in combat operations during the first 6 months of Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, accruing over 1,400 hours of operational flight time over nearly 20 years of active and reserve military service to our nation. Congressman Garcia decided to separate from the Navy with an honorable discharge and focus on his family. He subsequently joined the Raytheon Company as an executive. Congressman Garcia is a native of Santa Clarita since his move to Saugus in 1983 with his mother and stepfather at the age of 7. From a young age, Congressman Garcia yearned to serve his nation. He views his role as representative for California's 27th District as a continuation of that lifelong desire, as well as a sense of responsibility to give back to his local community. He lives in Santa Clarita with his wife, Rebecca, and their 2 sons. Congressman Garcia currently serves on 3 House committees: the House Committee on Appropriations, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. So it's my pleasure to welcome today Congressman Mike Garcia. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tracy, for that kind introduction. We'll get the shorter version for y'all next time, so we don't waste all of our time on me. I want to thank you for this. I think this is the third iteration, third opportunity here I've had to speak to the folks in this program. What a great program, and thank you for your leadership in this. Thank you for pulling this together and reminding us all that it's never too late to keep learning. It's never too late to keep trying to get better whether it's our personal life or our professional development in this case. So, and I understand you're moving on to actually work with the California DOJ on the policy side yourself. So this will be your last proctoring of this event. So thank you again, Tracy. And it actually segues nicely into these charts, but I want to make sure you guys know this is your meeting. I'll try to keep my talk to a minimum here. I'll just kind of highlight things that have informed sort of my paradigms, my beliefs, my values, and helped with my decision making throughout my life. And as Tracy mentioned, I've had sort of a Forrest Gump kind of life, being able to serve in the military, being able to fly fighter jets off of aircraft carriers during combat operations. Being able to work at a major corporation leading very high technology programs, and then now being able to serve you all, representing you all at the federal level in the House of Representatives. It's been quite a ride, and I pinch myself still every day. But there are some fundamental core beliefs and principles that I ascribe to. Take them with a grain of salt. I know not everyone has the same values and principles, but I've found over my career that we can learn from each other, and when you learn from each other, you maybe prevent mistakes in your own careers, your own personal lives. And I've also learned that not everything we learn is from good leadership. We actually can learn from people that we disagree with as well. And I've learned the most from some of the worst leaders that I've come across, and it reminds you that you want to do the opposite of what they do. So today's focus is about decision making, but it's kind of open-ended. We'll, like I said, leave as much time at the end for questions. A lot going on right now in our nation's career, and we'll go to the next slide, Tracy. There's an old adage from 1910 from Theodore Roosevelt. Many of you have probably read it. It's called "Man in the Arena." It's part of a speech that he gave in Paris. And you can substitute "woman in the arena." Obviously, he probably wasn't the most politically correct when he put this into words. But if you go to the next slide, what the "Man in the Arena" speech was meant to convey is that it's easy to be the person in the stands. If you think of his metaphor, "Man in the Arena," it's about someone in a Coliseum. It's about the gladiator in the Coliseum. If you go back to old Roman times and the fight that those folks fought, the threats around them, that is what it feels like sometimes to be in public service. That's what it feels like sometimes to be in service of others. It's a daily grind, and it's easy to throw spears from the stands. But what he's trying to convey here, and it's kind of wild that this is all just two sentences. But it's better to try to get bloody, to get marred in dust, to fail, than to never have tried at all. And the last line, I think, is very important. And it's paying homage to those who do put their hat in, their name into the hat, do enter the arena for public service and to do good for the country. But it also refers to those who don't do that as cold and timid souls who will neither know victory nor defeat. And so in this world, especially with social media, it's easy to throw grenades, with our words on an anonymous platform and criticize others. The challenge comes from how do we actually get in the arena and actually try to solve problems? And this is why I think what Tracy's doing here, taking on this new role at the California DOJ, is very important. She is literally walking into an arena right now where she's going to be subject to the slings and arrows and the criticism, with the noble mission of making things better in a state where we desperately need it. So I just remind everyone of that. It is easy to be the spectator. It is easy to be the person on the sidelines throwing the arrows and making the criticisms. And it's not easy to be the person in the arena, the one that gets bloodied and repeatedly has to dust themselves off and get back up. But it is important that we all collectively do that at some point in service of our country or of our families or of our communities. Next slide. I live by the mantra that speed is life. If we can do something faster, it usually results in better outcomes, unless we're doing something just completely reckless, like flying into a mountain. Obviously, speed is not life in that case. But I've learned that a lot of people deliberate too much on certain things, and that's especially true in government, especially true at the federal government level. We will commission surveys and studies, and we'll deliberate and hand wring, and it would take years in some cases to do something that should just take months. And so we do need to move quicker, especially on the global stage relative to threats like China and Russia that do have the capability to move very fast. We have to figure out how to move faster. And in the Antelope Valley, actually, there's great examples. I know not everyone is in aerospace, but we have the new stealth bomber, the B-21, that was taken from basically drawings to the first several aircraft already being built. And you probably saw the headlines of the rollout last December at Plant 42 there locally. To be able to go that fast was an astounding achievement. And the government needs to do better. The government, whether it's the Social Security Office, the VA, Congress, the military, we have to collectively figure out how to go faster. So that's what I mean by speed is life. You shouldn't let perfect be the enemy of good enough, meaning we can sit and deliberate a problem forever, and eventually we may get to perfect. But in the meantime, we just spent years trying to figure out how to get to perfect. Sometimes good enough is good enough, and something that we should act on. And that's true in our daily lives. It's true at our workplaces everywhere. So I also don't like starting battles that I can't win. And if I start a fight, start a battle, maybe that's a little too confrontational. But if I take on a mission or a role, I know that I'm going to be successful in it before I take it on. I do my homework. I make sure that it's something that I can affect. It's something that if I get involved, I will be able to make that change. And it was true before I deliberated running for Congress. I wanted to make sure that I could actually win. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, and I didn't have all the answers on how I was going to win, but I knew it was a doable do. Some people tend to fight fights and pick every battle, regardless of the fact that they have nothing to do with influencing that or shaping it. And they may not even be willing to step into the arena to actually fight that good fight. And it leads to drama. It leads to people observing and throwing spears on the sidelines, but not actually helping us all collectively get better. So I always look at those before, and there's an old adage in Sun Tzu's Art of War book that says victors know they've won before the battle begins, and the losers figure it out sometime in the middle of the fight. And I think if we all did our homework a little bit better, if we all understood why we were trying to make change in the policies that we were trying to shape a little bit better, the country would be in a better place, frankly. And so for me, I always, fight for what is right. There's no exceptions. And there's a little tidbit. We are at a record low right now in Congress in terms of percentage of members who are veterans. I think we're at 17% right now of Congress, both in the House and the Senate, that are veterans. And that contrasts with in the 1970s and early 80s. I think we were at like 70% veterans serving in Congress. And veterans aren't necessarily better legislators. They're not necessarily even better people, but you do inherently and you don't inherently trust veterans more than other members of Congress, but you do trust them sooner. And I personally do trust them sooner. If it's someone even on the other side of the aisle that tells me that they're a veteran, I know that I can trust them. They're coming from a place of pure and noble intent, that they're wanting to serve their country, that they're wanting to make sure what they're doing is bringing security to the United States and making us a better country, and not for personal gain or some political agenda or some party, right? I'm not a big party guy. I think this whole Republican versus Democrat thing is silly. I think it's like Coke versus Pepsi, and it's kind of ridiculous. Chevy versus Ford. We have 1,000 ways to divide us right now. The question is, how do we unify around taking care of our country and its security, taking care of its people, especially when we have real threats that are external to our borders on a daily basis coming after us. So for me, it's very simple. I fight for what's right, and I want to make sure that I win those fights. And the three principles of God, country, family, very much, you know, I would give my life for this country, and I'm surprised I haven't already, but it does come with sacrifices, as we've discussed earlier. So next chart. We've got this thing called the OODA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, and act. I won't spend too much time on this, but this is something in your daily lives if you adopt this and you really understand it. But it basically starts with that first O, the observe. Whenever we're in a new situation, and not everything is a competition and not everything is a conflict, but there are things in life that if we can figure out how to adapt this OODA loop to our advantage, we will do better and we will get better outcomes, and we will get to quicker, better outcomes as well. And the first part of this, whenever there's new change or whenever we're dropped into a new situation, is to observe and look what's going on, see what the lay of the land is, and then quickly orient yourself. Where are you in that new landscape, and who are your allies? Who are the antibodies that will maybe be against you? Where do you want to go, and where are you relative to that goal? And then decide, right? And this decide portion is where people break out. This decide piece is where we may actually gain an advantage. A lot of people like to observe. A lot of people like to orient. They kind of go back and forth. They do the hand wringing. They're not really sure where they are, where they want to go. And then, and it actually paralyzes them and prevents them from making decisions. And again, we can't wait for perfect. We have to have just good enough sometimes before we make decisions. And this decision piece is very important. And then acting on those decisions. And in that acting, we actually have to do what we thought we were wanting to do and what we decided that we needed to do, but then continuously reassess and reorient where we are. You know, to me, the simplest example, I love, I've got an aquarium at home and I love fish, but there's always, you know, you get a new fish and there's always sort of this 50-50 odds that this fish is going to survive in the new tank, right? You drop them in the tank, they get let out of the bag, and there's half of them are frazzled, they're observing, they're orienting, and they're scared, and they go, you know, running around, and the other fish pick up on that, and they can actually sense that's a weak fish, and maybe that's my dinner, right? And so, but there's other fish that get put into that tank, and they orient themselves quickly. They understand where they are, they understand the environment. It may not be familiar territory, but they know it's something that they can survive and thrive in, and they decide to do so. And in their decision, they actually act upon it. They acclimate very well, and they continue to be part of that community. And so that's the simplest way to look at it. But that applies obviously to our jobs, to our families, to our schools, and any professional career, and actually daily orientation that we have. So just a little tool to put in your hip pocket. You'll be surprised if you think about this on a daily basis, how many things we experience on a daily basis that this OODA loop is very useful for. So next slide. All right, just a couple other little tidbits that, you know, inform how I behave and just things I've learned. I've learned that paranoid people live longer. I've been accused of being paranoid, but I always look at things sort of as a naval aviator, right? When you're in a single seat cockpit over a foreign country, literally everyone's trying to kill you. The folks on the ground are trying to kill you. The people in the air are trying to kill you. Sometimes your wingman is trying to kill you. The air traffic controllers are trying to kill you. And sometimes even your machine underneath you is trying to kill you. So you become paranoid. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as you don't let that be the single biggest driving force in your behavior. We cannot be driven by fear. And what we see out of a lot of elected officials is what I call fear-based behavior, where they may not believe in something, but they're scared of the repercussions of voting for something the way they do. They may not, for instance, really believe that we need to defund the police, but they fear the peer pressure that comes with not defunding the police, and some of these things have some very serious implications. And so we can't be driven by fear. We have to be cognizant of the threats around us and the things that we need to combat on a daily basis, and our adversaries, the friction, the people that we need to try to help and influence to get to a compromised position. But we can't be driven out of fear. We have to behave out of principles, and this is why I start with that chart that shows my principles first, because we've got to be reminded of those principles sometimes because of the fear that we all are subjected to. And it's easy to be fearful. The hard part is acting despite the fear in accordance with your principles. And you know, this old adage, you got to have a plan A. Plan A's are good. I think it was Muhammad Ali that said everyone has a plan A until they get punched in the face, and then, you know, then what do you do? And so the real success comes from plan B and plan, you know, all the way through Z if you need to. You've got to be able to evolve, and like I said, use that OODA loop. Along the lines of, you know, fear is not an excuse to change your behavior and the way we vote as elected officials. Stress should not be an excuse for character lapses or mistreating people. We all get stressed, and unfortunately we typically are more we're typically tougher on those closer to us, right? Whether it's our family, our friends. When we get stressed, they see our true colors, and we have to really try to not let the stress sort of compromise our personalities or compromise our integrity above all things. But that good character comes in the face of stress, and you can be a real role model for people when they see you in a stressful situation, still adhering to your core values and behaving in a manner that's commensurate with that leadership. That fourth bullet there, some say work harder, some say, you know, work smarter. And I think there's nothing wrong with doing both, right? We should all try to work smarter. We can get a lot more done. And the first 2 years I was in Congress, we would spend an hour and a half to vote sometimes, something that takes literally, you know, 20 seconds to do. We would spend an hour and a half. We've now gotten down to 2 minutes, but I would always joke, you know, we were cramming 1 day worth of work into 5 days when we would come into DC for session. We were literally doing 1 day's worth of work over 5 days, and it wasn't smart. It wasn't efficient. Some of it was because of COVID, but imagine a world where we actually work smarter, but we also do work harder, right? And there's a few examples of folks like that we see around us, and you know, entrepreneurs and business owners who actually are very intelligent, work very smart, but then they also work a lot longer and harder than most of us. We talk about principle-based behavior. For me, it all comes down to the 4 C's. I think the country can be better served, and a lot of our problems can be fixed if we just abide by the 4 C's. The Constitution, first and foremost. We don't need to rewrite the Constitution. The Constitution is something that is obviously amended. There are literally amendments to it. That's a great thing, and there's a process for that. It has evolved over the 200 years it's been in our service. But we also just need to reread the Constitution once in a while. Some folks are bent on every problem that we have leads to a new law or a new change to the Constitution, and in reality, we don't need to do 99% of those changes. We just need to reread the document and understand what it does. And I always use the equality versus equity. There's a push right now within our culture for equity, but our Constitution guarantees equality. Equity is sort of equal results, regardless of how hard you work or how much time you put into a problem. We're all going to end up in the same place. And equality is equal access, equal tools and access to resources. But the results are a function of how hard we work and how much time we put into it. And I use the stairs and the escalator at the airport. You know, when we travel, every week I go to the airport, I look at a set of escalators, and then I look at a set of stairs. And if I'm on time, I'll maybe take the escalator and you know, set my bag down for 30 seconds and ride the escalator up. But when I do that, I don't expect to be put in the front of the TSA line when I get up to the top, right? I'm going to fall behind the people who have chosen the stairs, that have run up the stairs with their luggage, maybe breathing a little harder or maybe sweating, but they're going to get in line before I do. And that is equality. We all have access to the stairs. We all have access to the escalator. And if we choose to take the escalator, that's a great choice. And if we choose to work harder and take the stairs, we're rewarded by getting in the line at security a little sooner. And that's the best way to think of it. Equality doesn't come at the expense of someone else. And when you look at what equity is doing, and a lot of politicians are talking about equity actually does come at the expense of another demographic, another American, another group of folks. And that is actually not in accordance with the Constitution. The Constitution guarantees that we are equal, all equal, regardless of race, gender, creed, religion, and that equality is not coming at the expense of others. And spent a lot of time on that, but I think it's very important to recognize what the Constitution is for, and it's written in blood, right? There's a lot of lessons learned from other nations that have failed and had revolutions and kings and tyrants that have led their people because of the fact that they didn't adhere to the principles in our Constitution that have been documented for us. So we just need to read it. Capitalism, competition, they sort of need to come together. I believe in free market capitalism. I believe that competition helps in that regard. The more competition we have, the better. How does this, relate to our normal lives, Mike? Well, healthcare, for instance, is a real problem for all of us. We have a very expensive healthcare right now, and I would submit it's because we don't have enough competition in that marketplace. We don't have enough actual capitalism in that marketplace. We have insurance companies and hospitals now that are running the roost and actually not looking out for the patients as much as they should be. And there's not enough competition. There's not other vendors that can come in and actually compete to get cost out, to get quality up, to get speed of medical services to be quicker. And so when you look at all of our troubled industries, the problem in most of those cases is we actually are not incentivizing people correctly. The customers are not actually getting the voice that they deserve and shaping that market space, and there's not enough competition. And then that last C is charity. I believe most of our problems are being addressed by charities, and we have fantastic charities in the district, Antelope Valley, Santa Clarita Valley, fantastic nonprofit organizations taking care of our veterans, our homeless. Some of these problems are getting bigger than we can manage right now, but the charities do it better than the governments, right? When we allocate $1 from the federal government to say a homeless problem, by the time that dollar gets to the streets, it behaves like 15 cents. It's very inefficient, right? Lots of overhead, lots of layers of government. When the state gives $1, it behaves more like 30 to 40 cents, and when the county does it, it behaves like 50 to 60 cents. And when Palmdale and Lancaster give $1, it behaves like 60 to 70 cents. But when a nonprofit organization and a charity puts $1 into a cause, whether it's homelessness or feeding underprivileged kids or helping with book drives, et cetera, this is a big part of what I do outside of the official side. On the campaign side, we do a lot of charity, because when $1 is given through charities, it behaves like 85 cents or 90 cents on the dollar, and we actually get the efficiencies of. So we do have to recognize the power of charities, and the government can enable charities, and they can provide the infrastructure and the tools for charities, but not every problem should be solved by the government. It should not be solved. If you're waiting for the federal government to solve your problems, you will be disappointed. Because the federal government, the state government, the county governments are there to provide for the common good, the common defense, and not for an individual's success. And so we do need to make sure that we're providing for that common defense, but the charities are where the best efficiencies are realized. So that's the 4 C's there, and there's a whole lot of we can talk about that. But next slide. My decision making in Congress. Next slide. I'll just say, first of all, we've already touched on most of my foundational principles: God, country, family. The four C's. I will always do what's right for the country above all things. But in the end, for me, it all comes down to security. Okay, security is the magic word, and you know, a lot of folks will talk about the elephants and donkeys or GOP and, you know, Democrat Party, left versus right, blue versus red. I actually don't care about those things. I align with the Republican Party because of where I am on the policies. But above all things, I'm wanting to provide security, whether it's Social Security and Medicare. By the way, my absolute number one priority within this is as we're navigating these budget challenges and these deficit spending challenges that we have, is to make sure that we are preserving Social Security and Medicare. Okay. The way we do that is to make sure those accounts stay whole. The way we do that is to make sure that we're not spending ourselves in an oblivion and driving inflation. The biggest penalty on our senior citizens who are on Social Security over the last couple of years is actually inflation. Okay. And so inflation is a product of spending too much from a federal government perspective. And so we need to cut spending, but not cut Social Security, not cut Medicare. And this is very important, because a lot of folks are trying to spin this narrative. And frankly, both parties are doing a good job at making sure that Social Security and Medicare are being supported and protected. So they're just trying to weaponize this for political purposes, which isn't right, but that's what politicians do. Very proud of this Sergeant Steve Owen defending our Defenders Act. I'm sure most of you from the Antelope Valley know who Steve Owen was. He was brutally murdered in the streets. He was a sergeant for the LA County Sheriffs, and basically LA County treated his case with kid gloves. They didn't prosecute the guy to the levels that they should have, and not soon enough. And so this Defending Our Defenders Act in honor of Sergeant Owen is making sure that from a federal government perspective, if you kill a law enforcement officer, that you're found guilty, that your punishment is life in prison or capital punishment. And I know there's a lot of debate about capital punishment. We don't need to have that here, but the bottom line is we need to be tougher on criminals, and especially criminals who not only commit murder, but murder those who provide us a security blanket on a daily basis. Taxes is on here. It goes in line with this SALT. We need lower taxes. The way you invigorate an economy is not by raising rates. The Fed is raising rates right now, and you're seeing mortgage rates, getting up to 7%, because the purpose of that is actually to try to slow our economy down. That he's having to do that because the inflation is so massive, the spending is out of control, that in order to get close to getting the economy back on the rails, the Fed has to artificially govern it by raising rates and disincentivizing people from buying things, which is what they're doing right now. It disincentivizes companies from hiring people and investing in their products. And so all of these things are very regressive. What we need is to lower taxes. What we need is to actually incentivize businesses to grow, incentivize them to hire, and allow individual taxpayers to keep more money in their pockets. And when we do that, you'll see business start coming back to life. You'll see spending from the households start picking back up, and we will right this economy again. But right now, there are literally jobs looking for people instead of people looking for jobs. So we need to get back to work, but we need to lower our taxes so we can keep our money. The state and local tax deduction limit, the SALT, is a thing that we can go into quite a bit. But basically, it's an artificial limit that prevents Californians from deducting more than $10,000 in their federal tax returns as a result of state and local taxes. So it used to be if you owned a home and you made $75,000 to $100,000 a year, you could deduct all of your state income tax. You can deduct all of your property taxes. Now they limit that to just $10,000 worth of deductions, and the Republican Party is not a fan of this, so I've been a champion of this even as a Republican. But it's not a first-class problem. This is something that's affecting the middle class, and as long as you have a home and have a job, you are hitting that $10,000 limit in California. So I'm very focused on getting that. MSLRA is a bill that we got to sign into law. The president actually signed my bill into law in January. This allows spouses of military members to transplant their professional licenses. So if someone gets orders to Edwards Air Force Base from Virginia, for instance, and their spouse, husband or wife, is a real estate agent, a doctor, a nurse, a teacher. Under the old law, they would need to get re-credentialed, and it could take years. That could take thousands of dollars. So my bill makes it so that all 50 states have to recognize those licenses. It's called reciprocity. It was signed into law. So now when someone gets orders to California, their spouse can continue to practice as a beautician, cosmetologist, real estate broker, without having to pay the thousands of dollars in months to do it. So, and in the end, we have, the constituent services that are literally the most important thing. And so I encourage you guys, if you have any issues with the VA, if you have any issues with Social Security, State Department, if you need visas, passports in a hurried fashion, just give us a call. If you're spending more than a couple days on an issue with the federal government, just give us a call, and we'll be able to help out quite a bit. You shouldn't have to call your congressman to get that kind of help, but the fact is that the federal agencies are broken right now, and they still haven't even gotten back to 100% workforce after COVID. So with that, folks, I will stop. I went on a little longer than I wanted, but I want to make sure we have time for Q&A, Tracy, as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have a question, comment for the congressman, this is the time where if you want to put that in the chat, I will read that to the group. If you want to DM me and put it in private, I'll read that to the group. Or if you want to take yourself off mute, just do so. If you want to raise your hand. I know somebody sent me a message saying, when you're in Congress, is it difficult to get a bill passed because we do have the two-party system, the Democrat and the Republicans? Is it difficult to get a bill passed?
Yeah, it can be difficult depending on the issue. Obviously, the more sort of common denominator you have, the easier it is, right? If you can get a bill that appeals to both parties, it's typically a little faster. Then you're just dealing with the bureaucracy. I'll give you an example. We're trying to just name a post office in Santa Clarita after a veteran who served in Vietnam, who passed away, Purple Heart recipient. But so that is pretty easy to get through, but I still have to go get 52 signatures from every member of Congress in California to sign off on it. Then it's got to go through a committee. So the bureaucracy is thicker than we want it to be sometimes. The more controversial ones and the bigger ones, especially when it comes to spending, do take longer. This is why our government ends up not passing budgets on time, because Congress waits too long to start having some of these negotiations. And I don't think it's necessarily bad that some of this is slow. There are things out there that I don't like, that I'm glad it takes a long time for them to navigate the system. But the goal is to find the common issues, and even further to negotiate to positions. So even though I have a bill, for instance, my SALT bill calls for the straight up removal of that deduction limit of $10,000. But I'm also very aware that that's probably not going to go anywhere, and that a compromised position like doubling that cap to $20,000 may actually go somewhere. Okay. I'm willing to make that compromise, even though it's not exactly what I wanted in my bill, because I know that's the only way something will get done. And that's what our founding fathers did. They made compromises along the way. And when they walked out of the signing of the Constitution, they were all kind of ticked off, right? None of them actually got what they wanted. They all got a flavor of what they wanted, but that document was exactly the right recipe for the nation's success. And that is true in Congress. There's 435 in the House. There's 100 in the Senate. We all have our own sort of personalities and opinions, and none of us will agree on everything, but most of us will agree on some things. And that's the key, is finding those some things and making sure that we actually move those things forward. And there's a lot. And so the challenge is prioritizing the things we think can get done.
Thank you for the answer. Oh, Carla in the chat, what is one thing you wish your constituents did more of? Thank you, Carla.
Ask for help. To be honest, we get a lot of veterans and seniors working Social Security that they've been running up this hill for 6 months trying to get help, and so we implore the constituents to seek assistance with, if it's the federal government, contact us in our office, and Charles is on this call as our representative. He's my district director in the district. If it's a state issue, contact Assemblyman Lackey or Carrillo, and they can help you out. And That's thing one. Thing two is get involved. Don't believe social media. Social media is a toxic environment right now, where you've got effectively folks pushing their own opinions and agendas without any substantiation behind it. If you're going to social media for your news, you're probably doing it wrong. I don't know where to go get reliable and objective news anymore, but it requires all of us, and the constituents need to do this, to understand the issues a little bit better and to be able to get enough perspective so that you can ask the right questions and get to ground truth. And I do that with everything. I look at all sources of news media, even though I may not agree with some of these perspectives. I understand and I see their perspectives. And the biggest thing is communicating. And you guys know I'm a Republican. I'm in a district where there's only 29% of the district is Republican. So not every vote I take is popular, right? Every vote for me is easy because of it being principle-based behavior. I vote in accordance with my principles. So I know where I'm voting very quickly on most of these issues because it aligns to my values and my principles: security of the country, the Constitution. So that the hard part isn't the vote. I don't wring my hands on the floor going, am I going to vote yes or vote no? By the way, those are the only options we have, right? Where I spend more time is communicating on the backside. And that's the hard part. The hard part is coming back and explaining to constituents why I voted a certain way. The hard part is taking something. By the way, it's not just someone who's on the other side of the aisle of me that I had to spend time explaining. There's people on my side of the aisle who, because I vote my principles, I don't always vote the party platform. It requires me to go talk to them as well. But constituents need to do the same thing. They need to try to understand the issues from multiple perspectives, get as deep as they can. And I can't tell you how many times folks have come up to me and gotten upset because I voted a certain way. And when I asked them if they actually read the legislation or if they understand the implications of the legislation, they didn't. They don't, right? So we all need to do better. We all need to hold our electeds accountable, but that requires us to do our homework as constituents as well.
Thank you, Congressman. We have David in the chat. Congressman Garcia, good morning. As a member of the House Foreign Affairs, I think, what is your position on the recent TikTok congressional hearing and its implications for national data privacy protections? How do you plan to work with your colleagues to address these concerns, and what steps do you think should be taken to ensure that the American consumers are protected from potential risks to their personal data? Thank you, David.
Great question, David, and good morning to you as well. I don't actually sit on the Foreign Affairs Committee, but I do sit on the Intelligence Committee, and then I sit on the Defense Subcommittee within Appropriations. So two very important committees when it comes to national security, and this TikTok issue is a national security issue. If you haven't seen it, sounds like David has, but there was a hearing. If you want to talk about the great unifying force, it may actually be TikTok at this point. You've got the Democrats and the Republicans jumping up and down talking about what a threat TikTok is to our nation's security. They own your information, basically. When you access their platform, they have access to your information. They own what you see. They control what you see. When you go on to TikTok, you are seeing what they feed you rather than getting what you seek. And unlike other platforms, that isn't necessarily an interactive process. It is owned by China. The revenue, the information goes back to the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, and they leverage that. And it is an Achilles tendon for our society right now. So I would submit there's other platforms out there. I would submit that Congress should ban the use of TikTok. I think even the executive branch, the president, is on board with that. So a very rare case where you've got both sides of the aisle and both the legislative and the executive branch agreeing on it. The question is, how are we going to do it? How are we going to implement it? And when are we going to do it? And I would submit that we need to do it sooner rather than later. It is a real problem. And even in some cases, if you're using an Android phone, they have the ability, and I don't know if Android has patched this or not, to access your microphone and your camera remotely through the app from their server. So this is a very dangerous app, and I'm a big First Amendment guy. No one's limiting your free speech. What we're trying to do here is protect American consumers and our kids from this platform that is feeding into the CCP's database and frankly violating our privacies, which is a part of the Constitution, but also a massive national security risk.
Thank you so much. We have somebody sent me a message. What is the toughest part of your job?
Like I said, there's not really tough votes. The travel is not great, right? I'm bouncing back and forth. My wife Rebecca and the two young boys, 16 and 6-year-old. So the sacrifices there are probably the toughest. Being gone 5 days a week, flying home for the weekends, and then flying back out to DC. I'm in a really ugly divorce with American Airlines right now, so dealing with them, and they need to do better. But sitting in row 12 of American Airlines is probably the toughest part. Everything else is not hard. It just requires you to work harder. It requires you to communicate more. And there are things that stress me out. This sort of fear that I have that we're not communicating enough with the constituents. We've done a lot of town halls, and we're getting ready to do another town hall in the Antelope Valley, I believe, is our next one coming up here very soon. But I want to make sure that we're over communicating. That's why I do weekly videos when I'm in DC. I do a week in review video so folks can know what we voted on, what we've done, and what has changed. We send weekly newsletters out to make sure that we're communicating, and then the town halls, and then events like this where we allow for that Q&A. You can't communicate too much, and my paranoia is that, while I have a job to do in DC, it's very important. I'm on very important committees, the constituent services, and paying attention to what's going on in the district and answering the constituents' concerns, especially when they don't agree with me on something, is priority number one.
Yeah, I think that's something that we do need to work on, because the discourse or the conversations tend to just break down so quickly. If you're on one side or the other, we tend not to be able to talk anymore, and that's so
Very
concerning.
true.
I find that very odd. Carla has a question. Do you have any recommendations for youth? Most of us are in the AV here, who would like to get involved in politics.
I would say volunteer for campaigns, regardless of what party you're affiliated with. You can do that. You can work in the official offices. I know we're hiring interns regularly. We have a good regular rotation. Charles can help us out with that, but I believe they're all paid now, Charles, right? So the interns in our official offices get a little bit of a compensation, but they get the exposure to what we do, and they can help out. There's an unlimited option out there, whether you want to be political or more on the policy and the official side. There's always folks craving that help, and we do need to get the younger generations involved. I think that's one of the weaknesses that we as a nation have. It's easy for not only our kids to get buried in their phones, but it's easy for parents now to get buried in their phones. And when you're buried in your phone, you're not talking about the issues. You're not talking about the principles that we abide by and the history of our country. We're not teaching our kids. So a lot of parents want to poke at the schools and say, hey, the schools need to do better. And I don't disagree with that. We need to invest in our schools. We need to pay teachers more money, frankly. But if we as parents aren't also teaching our children, if we as grandparents aren't teaching our grandchildren, then we're as much to blame as the school system. By the way, we have a potential solution for the school funding issue. California right now decrements school funding based on attendance, and in Lancaster, Palmdale, average attendance rates are like 90%. So those schools are getting a 10% haircut just because of attendance. They're not getting their full budgets. All that money goes back up to Sacramento and into some coffer that I don't know where they're spending the money. I don't think anyone really does. I'm trying to craft a piece of legislation that requires states to fully fund schools regardless of attendance rates. There's only like 4 or 5 states that do it like California does it. And what you guys know, the teachers can't control who shows up to class. So why are we punishing the teachers and the resources in the classroom? For various reasons, kids aren't going to school. Sometimes it's just because they're sick. So, I think California needs to do better in that regard. And we're trying to figure out from a federal perspective, how do we help California get there? So good question. So
Thank you, Congressman. A couple weeks back, we had Assemblyman Carrillo, who is newly elected, and we were talking about if you're wanting to go to the state level and you have issues or concerns, how to set up in a meeting like that. we would ask you the same question. So if you've got a federal issue that you're really concerned about, you're passionate about, you want to let your office know, we want to let you know, how would you go about doing that?
Just reach out to our office. Charles has his contact information in this chat. We have our website. I think it's mikegarcia.house.gov. People can go on there and submit queries there in terms of policies. If you just want to yell at us, you can call us and yell at us for policies. We have folks that take those messages, and I see those reports. And if you have a specific policy and you've got great ideas and you have that discussion, we have meetings all the time with constituents. So happy to set that up either in the Antelope Valley office, the Santa Clarita office, or if anyone's in DC and you want to have those meetings, or just see the office in a tour. We literally work for you. So the website and Charles directly for this small group is a great point of access. And we welcome all good ideas. And I may not agree with it, but we'll have that conversation. And if we agree with it, that Spouse Licensing Relief Act for the military that I talked about was actually a product of a meeting that I had with General Teichert, who was the general officer at Edwards Air Force Base like 4 years ago. Actually, he and I had this conversation. He came up with this idea, and that became law signed by President Biden just a few months ago. So it's because of those meetings that we have these options now.
Yeah, I think because I've worked in politics for legislators, I think people don't realize that you could have a very simple meeting, and that meeting could turn into a bill, something that is on your plate for the next year, something like that. So the constituents do have a lot of sway. And I think you also mentioned something that's very important. We are kind of what they call a purple district. So I think, as you mentioned, it's important to remember that just because you might be a Republican and we might be a Democrat, or you might be an independent, that you are for the constituents. So I know that you've been very open and very, comfortable with having these discussions. So
yeah, absolutely.
Not to be,
and like you said, we got to be able to have those conversations without writing each other off, without canceling each other, divorcing each other, right? This is the problem right now. And so I do welcome that. And that's why the town halls are so important. I like having longer town halls and doing them in person, because you get that interface. So that's very important. By the way, a lot of the issues folks call into are actually state issues or county issues. So if they call in and we say, hey, we can't, this isn't our AB5 or whatever it is, we will refer them to the state office, but we take on local issues as much as we can. The illegal grows, as you know, that all the marijuana grows in the fields out there were a product of constituents reaching out to us. And at first glance, it didn't look like a federal issue, but we were able to bring federal resources in to help the sheriffs eradicate those illegal marijuana grows in the high desert. So we're still working on that. That'll never go away, but we'll take on everything that we think we can be successful on.
Yeah, I know that is, I get your newsletter. I know that's a big issue. I have several friends in Lake LA, and it's a huge issue out there where people are and
they have seen a huge improvement out there, and every once in a while one will pop up and get taken down, but they're now pivoting to indoor illegal grows, which is not better, but it requires different funding and different strategies.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a couple seconds to just see, wrapping it up, if anybody has any more comments. Again, if you want to put that in the chat, I can read it. If you want to raise your hand, we can take you off mute. So I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds to see if anybody has anything else that they want to add before we close it out. And I'm not seeing any. Okay. And so I'm just going to take a couple more minutes. Wanted to give Congressman either a virtual or an actual round of applause. Thank you so much for your time today. Always love to hear from our legislators. It's always fabulous. And so let me take just a couple more minutes of your time. And so again, as I always mention, group site, if you are on group site, it's our chance to have a discussion of what we just talked about today, to speak with your other fellow cohort members. So if you're on that, I will be posting this morning or afternoon, so you can jump on there and put your thoughts in there. Linktree, I know Stephanie, my colleague, is going to put that in the chat. This is brought to you by Best Start Antelope Valley, and we are on Linktree. We're on all the social medias, Facebook, Instagram. So if you want to follow us, we'd love to have you follow us. You'll get all of our information on Facebook. We always post what's coming up in the AV, different flyers. When the Congressman has his town hall, we'll be posting that. So no worries about that. We'll get you covered next week. Super excited to have Mark Martinez. He is with California State University, Bakersfield, He'll be talking on ethics and immigration. So that will be next Tuesday. And so please come with us. That I did want to say thank you so much for joining us. As the Congressman mentioned, if you didn't hear already, I am leaving Children's Bureau. I have been so pleased to be a part of Children's Bureau. I've been with them for 3 years. I am leaving. So this is actually my last policy academy. I've been so pleased to be a part of the academy. It was something that I created with my director, Sylvia Scott. So this is one of the most things that I'm very proud of. So I am leaving. I'm joining the state of California Department of Justice Attorney General's office. I'm going to be a policy analyst with them. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much. I've really been pleased to be a part of this. I know a couple of people here have sent me their well wishes, and it really makes me it's very gratifying. So thank you so much. The academy will continue after I go. My team will be absolutely, Carla. My team will continue on the good work. But again, just wanted to say thank you so much. Hope you're enjoying the academy. And again, they'll be back next Tuesday. So take care and see you next.
Thanks, Tracy. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Congressman. And so take care and next Tuesday. So thank you. Thank you, Jean. And I'm going to stop.